In this video, I'm going to compare the Motorola One 5G Ace with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. Let's take a look. Both of these phones are sub $300 5G devices. So you have the cheapest 5G Motorola with the cheapest 5G Samsung. So these are two very intriguing devices if you want to get a 5G phone on the cheap, on the low. Apart from getting these phones unlocked for under $300, you could also get these for even cheaper on prepaid at Metro here in the US for around $30 when you port in your number. So you can get these anywhere from $30 all the way up to $300 unlocked. So it's a very good deal, but let's see which phone is better. For the overall size, the 5G Ace from Motorola is 6.5 inches tall, 3 inches wide, 0.39 inches thick. The Samsung A32 is 6.4 inches tall, 3 inches wide, 0.36 inches thick. So these phones are more on the thicker side, and they're very similar when it comes to the 6.5 inch display. That's very typical of phones nowadays. They're more on the larger side. When it comes to build quality, folks, both of these phones are not going to be flagship quality. These are going to be plastic build all around, but it's expected at this price point. There's nothing wrong being a plastic phone at this price point. If you're going to slap a case on it, you won't even notice the difference. Now let's talk about weight. So both of these are kind of hefty in weight, very similar to the 5G Ace from Motorola, 7.4 ounces. The Samsung is 7.2 ounces. So these are both over the 7-ounce mark. So we're getting close to half a pound of phone here. So it's these aren't very lightweight phones, but there's a benefit to having a heftier weight to these phones, which I'll get to in a minute. Along with being low-cost budget devices, you're gonna get very different displays. You're getting a 6.7 inch display on the Motorola versus 6.5 on the Samsung, but you have 1080p resolution on the Motorola while you get 720 resolution on the Samsung. When you break it down, you got a PPI of 393 on the Motorola, 270 PPI on the Samsung. So on paper, the Motorola is just way better in resolution. The Samsung A32 really dipped down into a low resolution. Even free phones offer 1080p displays, so it's kind of disappointing in the resolution department. The Motorola has a little bit bigger 6.7 inch display, but I mean, for the normal person that's not really into phones, I think they'll be pleasantly surprised by both of these devices, even on the Samsung. But if you like screens, the Motorola will serve you better. As for the software, we're running Android 10 on the Motorola. We got Android 11 on the Samsung. You have a Motorola stock version of Android on the Motorola, and you have the Samsung One UI on top on the Samsung. It's really breaking down to preference for each person. If you like more stock, roll with the Motorola. It has its own things and little gestures and shortcuts that make it useful, while the Samsung has a lot of customization, and it's a lot of people are just used to having a Samsung experience. And the beauty of the A32 5G Samsung is that even though this is a sub $300 device, it's gonna feel like the software that's found on a flagship Samsung. So to each their own. Neither of these devices are going to get much updates. You're not going to get the flagship 4, 5, 6 years of updates on other flagship devices. But my personal experience, Android doesn't change that much version to version, so it's not a big deal, especially at this price point. For the chipset, you have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 750 on the Motorola. The Samsung has a MediaTek 720 chipset. So both of these are not flagship chipsets, but the Motorola has the a little bit more powerful, well-known processor, while the Samsung has a lower-end MediaTek, not well-known processor. For 99% of people, both of these processors will work just fine running all the major apps with no problem. Also, both of these phones are running with 4 gigs of RAM, which is perfectly fine for all the apps that you're running in the background. I doubt a lot of people will run into problems with the apps running in the background if you're a normal person. If you're a power user, you might need to pick up a phone with more RAM, but 4 gigs is pretty good at this price point. You pair that with the chipsets of the respective phones, this should serve a pleasant experience. Nothing should be running so slow, or not a lot of apps should be crashing. You should be perfectly fine. When it comes to internal storage, both of these devices have 64 gigs of storage, which is perfectly okay. That should be more than enough for most people, although there's some other low budget devices that actually come with 128 gigs of storage. Luckily, both of these phones could be expanded with micro SD card slots, so storage shouldn't be an issue on either of these devices. Now let's get to the cameras. You have a triple camera on the Motorola. You have a 48 megapixel main camera, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel macro. The Samsung has a 4 camera setup, 48 megapixel main, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro, 2 megapixel depth. Honestly, you're only going to be worried about mostly the main camera and maybe the ultra wide. And if you really care about ultra wide cameras, the Samsung has a better one because it has a 123-degree field of view, so you're going to get more of your subject in an ultra wide shot on the Samsung. Both of these phones will be perfectly acceptable to the eye. It's going to be pleasing. It's not going to be flagship quality, but in the right setting, in the right sunlight outside, these phones should be great taking pictures and taking videos. And speaking of video, both of these phones take video at 4K, which is awesome at these low-end prices. For the selfie camera, you have a 16 megapixel shooter on the Motorola, 13 megapixel on the Samsung, and both shoot selfie videos at 1080p, which is perfectly fine. Both of these phones also have the bonus of having a headphone jack, so if you want to connect your headphones, your mic, or connect it to your car via aux cord to listen to music, you'll be happily surprised, and everything should work perfectly fine with that. Both of these phones also work very good with wearables and wireless devices. You got Bluetooth 5.1 on the Motorola, Bluetooth 5.0 on the Samsung. Both of these versions of Bluetooth are perfectly acceptable to connect your smartwatch, your smart band, your wireless headphones and speakers. So there's no problem connecting devices to both of these phones. Both phones offer NFC, except that the Samsung will depend on your market, and it's mostly going to be reserved for payment services. They both have USB Type-C for charging, and for security and unlocking, they both have fingerprint readers. You got a rear-mounted one on the Motorola, side-mounted on the Samsung. The little bonus here for the Samsung, you'll probably be able to unlock this device without lifting it from a table. And going back to earlier when I said that these devices are kind of thick, and the reason being is actually a positive one, is because they both pack a big battery. They both carry a 5,000 milliamp battery, which is going to be awesome. It should give you an all-day battery life. And since these are 5G phones, this is what you need, and that's what's very important in a phone. Is 5G drains a lot of battery. You want a big battery, and 5,000 will be perfectly fine for these devices. And if you do manage to need a charge, both of these phones also offer at least some type of fast charging, and they both offer 15 watts. So in conclusion, which one is the better phone? Well, these are so similar. They have similar pricing, but it's gonna come down to a few things. I think at the end of the day, the Samsung will probably be a better deal because more of the time, if you want to unlock, you're probably going to find it a little bit cheaper than the Motorola. You have that ultra wide camera with a bigger field of view on the Samsung. You also get a newer version of Android if that's something that you care about. Other than that, I don't see any other real big differences unless you really care about screen quality. Then if you want screen quality a little bit better, the Motorola will serve you better. Also, it comes down to software. If you like a more stock version of Android, the Motorola will serve you better. But if you really like Samsung experience and Samsung type features, then roll with the A32. But if I had to spend my money on these phones, I'd probably go with the Samsung, just because to me, I don't think the difference in screen quality is going to make much of a difference, especially if you can find that phone for cheaper. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.